Well, thanks for coming today. This is one of many interviews we've been doing with people as part of the 100th anniversary project that PIPSC is doing. So we just wanted to ask you today about your experience working in the public service and being part of PIPSC. So you can stop at any time, pause, say whatever's on your mind, or decline to answer any questions we ask as well. So otherwise it's pretty quiet. So why don't you start
Thank you.
So why don't you start off just telling us what you do in the public service, when you joined, and how you got involved with the Institute?
I joined the public service in 1999, end of 1999, so that's quite a long time. Before that, I came to Canada 5 years before that. So I was working for an international consulting company for 5 years
Where did you come from?
in Ottawa. I came from Pakistan.
Pakistan?
Yeah, I lived in Islamabad before that, and then I came to Canada and landed in Toronto, came to Ottawa, and I found a job here. So then I was living in Ottawa. As part of my consulting career that I had, I got opportunities to consult for the federal government, and that included the Environment Canada. So I was consulting for Environment Canada, and then the work kept growing for my skills and expertise, and then they gave me an offer to say, would you like to work full-time? So I joined the department in 1999. I was working on different things. My expertise was more international, and because I had a broad view, I knew what was going on in the world. I was focused on capacity building in developing countries, and then kind of slowly migrated into technology transfer projects as well. And that's the kinds of consultancy I was doing for Environment Canada, because at that time the department was working with, at the time, Industry Canada, and they wanted that Canada should be able to export clean technologies to developing countries. And in order to export clean technologies to developing countries, because they have different environment and different infrastructure, that means that you have to do that customization to try new technologies and adapt them to the local environment and needs, and try them there. So we were doing demonstration projects in other countries.
So are you an engineer, or what's your educational background?
I have a broad background, so I've studied science, basic science, chemistry, and zoology, but then later on I also did my MBA. So I kind of broadened, that's why I was focusing. So even though we were working on technologies, but then there's an element of market, because you want technologies to be the market to bear the cost and be able to sustain them. So that was a good combination for me, and I was working on technology transfer projects. I was working with technology companies, so they were expert in their own technologies. I didn't need to know all the details of every technology, but I needed enough to understand how to adapt those technologies into environment in developing countries. So that's what I started doing.
And how did you get involved with the Institute from there?
So I got involved with the Institute much later, actually. I must say, like, for several years, I didn't even know that I was supposed to be a member of PIPSC. And then somebody did tell me, I think I received some information about the PIPSC, that I was paying dues to PIPSC as membership, and that I was a member if I wanted to. So then I filled in an application form and sent it out, and again I forgot about it. I was not really involved until later. At some point I received a invitation to attend an AGM. So I filled my form and I was selected as a delegate, and I attended the AGM. That was my first direct contact with the union. And Steve Hingle was the president of the institute at that time. I was very impressed with his speech and the whole AGM. but I never felt the need for the union. I never had issues or problems, or I didn't even know. I didn't really read my collective agreements and other things. I came from the private sector where I thought, it's your work. You do good job, your boss is happy, you get promotions, your salary will go up. So it was a few years later, because when I was in the private sector, my salary was going up every year, and I didn't have to ask for anything. Because they look at you, you're a cost and you're generating revenue. And they want to reward you because they want to keep you. And I thought that's how public sector will work as well. You just go, you demonstrate, keep your head down, do a good job, and you will get rewarded. It was much later I found out that actually it doesn't work like that in the public service. So that's how then I got it. So it was all positive. I haven't come to the union with a complaint or anything. It's more about a positive discussions and the learning opportunities that I found with the union. That's how then I became a steward, because then I got into these trainings, got to know, better understand your collective agreements, terms and conditions of employment, and I soon got involved in consultation because my colleagues, they were looking for somebody like me, and they say, hey, now that you're a steward, we have these consultation team meetings and we want you there. So I was really fortunate. They were very good stewards, colleagues that got me involved and helped me get into the system. So then I started contributing through consultation. Well, I thought that was an interest to me, how to improve the work environment for everybody. Very positive.
And in terms of improving the work environment, what sort of initiatives did you get involved with?
So initially I was of course following the lead of my colleagues. They were the ones who were identifying what the needs were, and we were dealing with things like just workplace, when there were changes made to the workplace, making sure employees were aware and their needs were taken into consideration. I got involved into duty to accommodate because there were people who needed help because of either they had disability or for whatever reason. So I kind of slowly started to learn that. And that's when I found out about the Government of Canada initiatives on diversity and inclusion. And at that time, it was all about embracing change and employment equity. So I got involved into that. And then they gave me that file. They say, well, you are interested in this, so why don't you? Because there's nobody who's leading this file, so why don't you become the consultation team lead on employment equity? So that was the first time I become a member of the consultation team and the national consultation team, and my file was employment equity.
And how employment equity was first implemented in Canada in the federal government. What was that process like? Was it contentious, or was it how did the institute interact with it?
So it was very collaborative. It was not a lot of contentious issues. It was more collaborative, and we were going at the time through a bit of difficulty in the public sector because of budget cuts. So when I was there, it was the budget cuts days, and then slowly things got better. And so I was just so pleased when I was seeing all those good announcements where the government was making announcements to provide more budget, making things easier, more funding for various programs. And that's how employment equity was getting funding as well. And there were programs that were happening. So everything was good. When I was involved, everything was good, and we were happy public servants.
And as somebody who emigrated to Canada, did you find were there a lot of other new Canadians working in public service with you? And if so, how did they find it as a workplace? Did they find it a welcoming workplace?
Yeah, I think that's really important question that you asked, because there were not a lot of people coming from other countries in the public service. I didn't find where I was working, there was hardly anybody. There were very few people who were from other backgrounds. There was a colleague who was from Chinese background. There was a colleague who was from Ukrainian background. There were colleagues from Polish background. So there was a little bit, but most of it was very, very, very few. And the way I found a job in the public service, I thought I could never find a job in the public service through the normal channels. I was lucky because I happened to get an opportunity because my company was doing business with the federal government. And that's how I got in contact with the federal government, and I got opportunities to do work. Honestly, I thought that if I hadn't made those contacts and people had not seen and given me an opportunity to demonstrate my skills and my work, I would not have gone through the process of getting a job in the federal government. I still have lots of friends that I know very good. They are as good or even better than me in terms of education qualifications. Because my education qualifications are all from Pakistan. I studied in Pakistan, but I have friends from Pakistan that studied in Canada, Carleton University, University of Ottawa, McGill University in the US, with masters from here, and they found it very hard to get into the system. So I think I got into the system because somebody gave me opportunities to demonstrate my skills and to demonstrate that I can get things done.
Pause for just a second.
You will pause for a second.
You can get a cough down.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. So what do you think is a barrier to new Canadians working in the federal public sector then? Is it credentials, is it language, is it not knowing that you can apply, is it a combination of those things?
There are so many things, and I think that includes what you mentioned. Well, certainly credential is a big issue because getting the credentials verified is an issue. It's not easy. That takes a long process. These are the hard things that are easy to identify that we can resolve. Even still, we haven't resolved them as much like what we would like to. Like currently, my colleagues, and I don't go through that because I'm not changing jobs and I'm not getting promotions. So, but I know that my colleagues have a difficult time every time they have to apply for another position to either get a promotion or lateral movement. They have to recertify, and I was on the task force for the federal government on diversity and inclusion, and one of the recommendations we had is that there should be a system where once you verify the credentials, they should get into the system, and then they should go with you wherever you are, and you don't have to do it again and again within the federal public service. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. That why once you have certified your credentials, they are in the system and somebody has accepted them, why would you need to go to them again? That's one of the recommendations that we have made in the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, which I was co-chairing, representing PIPSC, the unions, and I was co-chairing that report. We submitted that report in 1 year ago, December 2017. We haven't seen the government's response yet. It's like 1 year. And I am pushing, and our president, Debbie Davio, has written to the chief human resource officer on that because now the recommendations are there, the report is there, now it starts to, you need to implement them. So I'm digressing a little bit, but just to say that these are some of the, I think, easy fixes that even then we find it hard to fix. But there are so many other things. You come from another country, and it was my experience in the private sector also, that when I got the job, and I could clearly see that even though the president of the company selected me and appointed me, I could see rumblings in the company where people were kind of questioning his judgment, because everybody thinks that, yeah, even if you were successful in that other country, that doesn't mean that you will be successful in Canada, because there is this belief that Canada and USA are different than the rest of the world. And just because you are successful, in other countries, you still are not up to standard here. So there's all this questioning, which makes it very hard, because when you're working somewhere, and even when you have the confidence of the person who hired you and give you work, you hear rumblings where people are kind of doubting you. Every time you're doing something, they're kind of doubting you. It does pull you down, right? So those are some of the factors. But in addition to that, getting into the public service is not easy. I just don't know how people get in unless you know somebody in the public service. If you're from another country, well, forget about public service. You don't even know how Canada operates. You don't have contacts. Many people don't have contacts. They don't know who to go to. And we certainly, I come from Pakistan, and we didn't have an infrastructure where there was a place where you could go and you could say, hey guys, I'm new to this country and I need some help. Even where to get help from. Those mechanisms don't exist. And that's why we are recommending to the public service to improve those areas, reach out to communities so that they know how you get into the public service.
Does the public service now have recruiting problems? Can it fill jobs?
Well, it depends how you say, because the system is such that the Treasury Board requires minimum qualifications for every position. And the minimum qualifications are really the floor. So they will say, like, to give you an example, let's say if the government wants to hire a PC2, most PC2s they have master's degrees and they have PhD degrees, many of them. But the minimum qualification is not master's and it's not PhDs. It's much, much lower than that. So that means that if a manager is looking for somebody, they will ask for somebody with qualifications. And they can't get it, they will just lower their qualifications and get somebody at the lower level. So in the federal government, to ask this question about whether they have difficulty recruitment, there is no easy answer, because they have such a big leeway where they can just hire somebody because they have to get somebody. Another issue is that everything works by budget year, and that means that why are you hiring? You're hiring either because somebody left and there's a vacancy that you now need to fill in, and that means that there's work that has to be done. So managers are under constraint that they want to hire somebody very quickly so that they have somebody in the seat. And that compromises your ability to think long term, to say we have to hire public servants so that they can serve the public for the next 20, 25 years. That process just doesn't happen. Or another reason is you got a budget, so the budget was announced, you got your Treasury Board submission, now you have the money to hire somebody, the money is available for the next 2 years. Well, you got to hire somebody right away, because you cannot wait. If you wait, you're losing your budget, because now you don't have 2 years, you will have maybe 1 year left by the time you hire somebody if you do a thorough process. So managers are constrained to fire somebody very quickly, and therefore the question whether they can fill in positions or not, it's only restricted to like very specialized areas.
Yeah. I mentioned to you on the phone, one of the things we're also benefiting from with these interviews is asking people to talk about the value of PIPS and what are we celebrating when we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of PIPS.
Right.
And I'd like your perspective on that if you could.
Yeah, well, PIPS is uniquely placed because we are a professional institute and our members are all professionals. And that's where, like, are we a union of workers? Because traditionally the union is for people who are doing identical jobs, they work in large numbers, and therefore for the employer it's easy to replace them, right? Instead of one, they bring somebody else because you're an assembly line and everybody can do the job, so you need a union. Or there are professional associations such as the one for doctors, for engineers and others, where they keep very high standards and they lobby on behalf of their members, making sure that their members are getting the work that they should be getting and not somebody else. One example is, for example, the doctors in this country. There are these provincial bodies, which means that a lot of doctors coming from other countries are not getting the jobs. They are not getting the jobs because these professional bodies keep them out, because they want to protect their own members, right? So there's kind of, a bit of tension because you are not going to let everybody do that job. And therefore, we cannot access doctors. Many people do not have a family doctor. They don't need a very specialized, let's say if there was a difference. First of all, I don't think there's a difference. I think the doctors coming from other countries are also very well qualified and they will take care of everything. Or they may need maybe 6 months or so to get used to the system, maybe a year, but they are basically quite well qualified. But for many day-to-day elements, we don't need anybody specialized. We just need somebody who is able to understand what is the diagnosis and what's the medication that you need to take. But because these professional associations are keeping the lid, which makes it very hard for Canadians to find doctors. So you see, so the Professional Institute is kind of somewhere in the middle. On the one hand, our members are in the public sector primarily, not all of them, but most of the time. And I'm certainly one of them. So you're looking for people who are, how to organize them, making sure that they can deliver work, but they are not delivering work for somebody to make a profit. They are working for Canadians. They are working to deliver services to the public, right? That means that in a lot of cases, like, we cannot just walk away from our job. Why? Because we have a responsibility, right? Like, I'm not a public servant just because I want to make my bill, just to pay my bills. I'm proud because I'm delivering services to Canadians, right? So even if I have a dispute over salary or over certain other things, it will take a long push for me to walk out of my job. I would rather be working because that's why I'm there for. And that puts PIPS in a unique position. And that's why, as a PIPS member, I'm proud of being a PIPS member. Because it's not just because they negotiate my salary or my allowances. It's not because they negotiate my terms and conditions of employment. It's also because I identify myself with a group of professionals that work for the public.
Can I record you saying happy 100th anniversary, PIPS? Good voice, strong voice.
Happy 100th anniversary of PIPS.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great.
For
Thank
your
you.
time today, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good.